I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda and to excuse Hamilton.
Good morning, everyone. We will call the meeting to order. Wayne is excused for now. He's going to be late. We're not sure when he's going to arrive. Anne-Marie has already made a motion to accept the minutes. Are there any objections? All in favor? Good. Any post-agenda items? We have an adoption of the agenda, please. Tracy moves. All in favor? And that passes, and then we have to bring this tabled motion back. Can we have a motion to untable it or lift it? Alan does it? What's that? Okay, you want to leave?
I'm just going to excuse myself for perceived pecuniary interest.
You bet. Can we untable the motion, please? Kelly moves. All in favor? All right. Who's taking it? Alice, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to be Diane today. She's in another municipality with meetings. So this is subdivision file 2019-0-011, Northwest 181615. At the previous meeting, there was a request for additional information. There's a memo attached with the file for today. So the first issue was the location of the septic field, so that the plan has been revised on the drawing you can see, so that it is being identified as entirely within the fence line. So there is a revised subdivision plan, which shows the septic field is at least 2.71 meters from the nearest property line, and so the minimum setback requirement can be met. The proposed property lines have been revised also slightly to closer follow the existing fence lines. And the second issue was the distance between the outside wheel track of the pivot, and it's showing that that track to the nearest property line is 12.03 meters. So in that regard, that was the issues that were brought up at the last meeting. And so I can attempt to answer questions on Diane's behalf.
Okay. Are there any questions? Is the information sufficient? Yes, Kelly.
So my question is travel of a pivot, 12.3 meters. Is that going to be a problem as that pivot moves? I'm an old-time irrigator, so I don't have pivot experience. I just worry about that parcel selling and then that pivot coming onto the new landowner's property, and then we have the problem to deal with.
Well, usually they're not floating in the middle, so they don't move very much.
Okay.
And most of the time you can turn the water off.
Oh, right, if the gun is shooting over there. Mm-hmm.
And we certainly have done that we have seen that in past things.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything further? Then I would entertain a motion. Kelly moves as recommended. Ready to vote? All in favor? That is passed. Thank you. No vote. Yes, Alice.
Sorry, just one note. I didn't print off the resolution. I'll print it off and bring it back for signing probably at lunchtime, if that works for you.
Sure. No problem. No post-agenda items, nothing in camera. Question period. No questions? Then I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
All right, we'll call our council meeting to order. First of all, we'll get a motion to, oh no, we don't need a motion to excuse Wayne. He is planning to come. He has some cow problems this morning. Adoption of the minutes of May 9th. Clarence.
Just a few comments about where Kevin made some suggestions on tax rates and so forth. Just trying to figure out where it's at. It would be under regionalization taxation policy, 10.5. I think the last part of that wasn't quite accurate, and Kevin can probably better explain what he said than I can, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
10.5.
Okay, so I'm assuming the section under the Chief Administrative Officer, so I think Pam circulated these lanes, Lane had reviewed them, but I didn't get a chance to comment on them, so they went out fairly quickly. So the first part, existing rates for 3 years, utilizing existing rates for 3 years is correct. User fee philosophy required to pay 100% of services provided for identifiable items is correct. The region should adopt a costing model used by the County of Newell to determine true costing of providing services. I think that's correct. For tax rates, he suggested mill rates of 3.25. They're shown in percentages, but it's the same. 3.25 for rural residential and ag, 6.5 for urbans over 1,000. That doesn't say that in there, but it should. The same percentage for small commercial. If the business license structure was adopted that I suggested, and then 8.125 for non-res is correct. 25% of tax revenue would be allocated to recreation. I don't think that is correct. I think I said 25% of recreation be funded through taxation, and the balance would be funded through user fees or a special tax. I know there was debate on the groups. Some groups wouldn't be able to afford that because they get 100% currently. So I think we had talked about that being able to be covered through a special tax for a particular area. Capital funding for recreation would be funded 50-50 between the municipality, it wouldn't be the county, and the recreation facility. So what I had suggested there is taxation would fund 50% of recreation capital. I think that is the intent. Annual program funding for programming would be available to recreation groups as it is now. And I think I said that there needs to be a funding for programming because we have facilities that covered ahead of that. So, and then that was the starting point that we had talked about. I'm not sure if there's, like it probably needs to be reworded a bit just to clear it up, but I think the intent was missed a little bit, but I don't know if that clarifies it.
So there were quite a number of changes that I heard in there. I'm not sure if...
Yeah, I think what we should do probably is just hold off approving these, and I'll just rewrite that section quickly, and then we can deal with it later if that works.
Yeah, that sounds good. Everybody fine with that? So we'll just hold off on the adoption of the minutes. Post-agenda items. All right.
I have some post agendas
Oh,
in camera,
sorry.
please.
In camera, yeah.
Yeah, so we have 2 land, 1 intergovernmental, 1 legal, and 1 labor.
You're hitting them all. Intergovernmental labor, legal, what was the first one, Cal?
To land.
Land, okay, right. Okay, anything else before we adopt the agenda? Somebody want to make that motion? Tracy moves, all in favor, opposed, motion is carried. No one here for question period or no motion. Public hearings at 11:30, so we'll skip through 7 and 8. There are no delegations. This is amazing. We're at Ag Service Business. I haven't heard if...
Can we give Todd 15 minutes before
Absolutely.
we deal with his?
Yeah. We're going to put the admin business there to do with that road closure in at the same time as public hearings. And so that will move us to 11.2, Palliser Economic Partnership, Notice of Special Resolution.
So we've received notice of the special motion that is proposed to take place during the upcoming AGM for Palliser Economic Partnership. I think everything is pretty much explained in the documentation that we've received, and it would be in order for council to provide direction for your delegates on how you want them to vote during the meeting. I guess in addition to that, you need to specify which of the delegates are going to be the one that will vote on behalf of the county as well.
Alrighty, so this is about the change of the Constitution or whatever it's called, I guess. Anybody have any questions about it, or Anne-Marie, you have any comments in regards to?
A lot of it is just cleaning up of the paperwork because there were some discrepancies in different bylaws and resolutions. So it looked fine to me.
Questions, Clarence?
Well, with it, we're also, by passing that, we would be passing increases to the budget.
That's not separate.
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's not, unless it is, I didn't read it that way.
I think I did. I don't know. I'm just going to look.
Yeah, there was a request that came through that's the next agenda item that deals with budget increases that have been proposed for PEP. That's,
So that the budget isn't part of this first motion, then?
correct.
Okay.
So it's just about the special resolution to start with, a bit of a reorganization, or well, sorting out of things. Anybody have any other questions? If not, we have to figure out if we are supporting that. And so then that would be giving guidance to the people who, so how, is it just you that votes, Anne-Marie, or that we have business?
We have a business rep, and that's Diane, the clerk, but I'm okay with voting at that meeting.
Okay. And so, does everybody vote? Like, Diane has a vote as well?
During the regular meetings, but at the AGM, I understand there's one vote.
That's right. For this particular matter, there will only be one vote, and we need to, or council needs to specify who it is that's going to be voting on behalf of council.
Okay. So, could we get that motion put forth? Kelly?
I'll move that we vote in favor of the special resolution at the PEP AGM.
And that obviously our member will be the person voting, Anne-Marie. All right, discussion, all in favor, opposed, motion is carried. And then item 3 is the contribution rates.
So yes, this particular agenda item is going to be also dealt with during the AGM. They are proposing an increase in the rates for budget years 2020, 2021, and 2022.
Questions, comments? I think if I recall, a long time ago, this started out at 23 cents a member per capita, and then that stayed till when, 2011? Is that what it said in the information? 2012, somewhere in there, it was changed. So this would indicate increases for the next 3 years. Anne-Marie.
Yeah, 10 cents for the next 3 years, so it's not well, it's a 30% increase over 3 years, I guess. Economic development is it's frustrating at times, and you don't always see the benefits of it. You know, I mean, and when you think about it, just for all the municipalities in southern Alberta to get together and focus on what they can do for southern Alberta is probably worth the $10,000-$12,000 that we put into it. So I'm okay with the increase.
Kelly?
My question is, what's in the bank? Do we have a financial accounting to date?
For our budget or their budget?
I didn't look at it, but that's a good question. And a lot of the money that's in the budget is grants that PEP applies for the government. And in a lot of cases, they hire consultants to do certain studies. And some studies are very beneficial, others just sit on the shelf. So that's part of the frustration too. So when you look at the budget, I'm thinking maybe $250,000, Lane. I don't know, but a lot of it is earmarked for studies and, you know, government grants that might come in or might have to be paid back if they're not used for studies.
Tracy?
Just to clarify, so most of the grants that they would apply for is matching 50-50 from the government to PEP then, or is there certain percentages, but they always have to have that funding sitting there, right, to prove it?
Correct. Some of them are matching, some of them are just a straight grant. But yeah, the money from the membership is for the matching grants and also for projects as they come up.
Brian?
I'm curious how much of the budget is taken up by administration. And, you know, I sat on that a few years ago, and, you know, and I don't know that information either, but by and large, your administrator, he's very good at chasing grants. I mean, I'll give him credit. I don't always agree with him, but I certainly know he's very good at doing that. But that's the question that comes to mind is administration costs.
I think the information they've provided there tells sort of the story of how they need money to secure more money. It's a bit of a catch-22. The final statement there, PEP generates revenues from member contributions to support the core operations. It's a matter of having funds available to undertake the projects. So they've got to have a bank account to get matching funds from the feds or the province, it appears, in most of the stuff that they do. The Ritas have, in my experience, have sort of taken on a new life because they were almost dead not that long ago. The Southeast actually has done quite well, I think, compared to some of them, but yeah, I don't know. things don't get cheaper. So it's not surprising that they want more money. So do we have to make a recommendation to how our member votes on this? I guess you don't want to take that on yourself, Emery.
No, I would like you guys to make a decision.
Kelly.
So could you get that financial accounting for us? And that would answer our questions so that we have it on file. I know a lot of boards that I'm sitting on, we're talking about caps. Like we have all this money going out of the county. How much is enough? When is it enough? So at some of the boards I'm sitting on, we're talking about putting caps on that, just to help the municipalities for budgeting purposes. And
All municipalities, not just the County of Newell.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it'll be a lively discussion. This will come up for discussion at the AGM, right? So we don't need to, we have another meeting before this. We have another couple of meetings before this. So if people want more information, I'm sure Anne-Marie or somebody, yes, the PEP AGM is the day after our second council meeting in June, so Anne-Marie?
I just found the operating budget. The total amount's 420, and administration is 126,000 out of that total.
So about a quarter, less, more than that. Yep. Clarence?
So I'll plead my ignorance. I'm really not sure what PEP does. And I know we've had reports, but it really hasn't interested me very much. So I'd like to have a report, or is there a summary somewhere of the activities that it's done over the years? And could we have that too, just to refresh me? Because I'll be very honest, I just haven't got a clue.
Oh, okay. Well, I do send you the minutes.
The minutes don't really tell us much. I want an evaluation of the programs. Because, you know, we're dealing with it here, we're dealing with the, you know, the economic development in our own region, and how do they fit together, and so I really, you know, I'm not a big fan of any of it, so I'd like to have a bit of explanation.
Brian?
So I'll go back to the years I sat on it, and I was involved when I was on the board. Probably one of the biggest projects we did was the transportation project around Medicine Hat, and they've done a lot of those type of things where they bring in somebody to do the research that determine where the best place to put like a development, how the access is available for transportation type issues, and then that report is available. It is sort of one of those things. I agree with Anne-Marie. They sit on these reports and then, well, you can't release it because somebody might actually get some value out of it. So that was very frustrating for me, because I thought, what is the value of a report if we can't roll it out to our industries? Anyways, it eventually does, but it seems like it takes forever. Again, they did the study in Brooks here regarding the waste to energy feasibility, and then they used some of the money. I think it was 100,000 that was allocated, and then they changed halfway through to that alternative energy type research. So it's really about getting the grants that, quite frankly, the area is entitled to. I don't know if entitled is the right word. I always feel uncomfortable because are we entitled to anything that we don't do ourselves? And then going out and hiring consultants in order to follow through on what that initiative is to hopefully help economic development within the regions. And they've moved that from, like I know in Oyen, they did a rail yard facility, and I think that was at the end, I think probably Anne-Marie knows more about that than me. And so they sort of facilitate all those things. But there's lots that they can do, and I guess that I see value. I guess for me, I'm curious, and I don't want to hang every discussion we have on a new government. I'm not so sure it's going to be as well supported with what I anticipate is a budget cut in our new provincial government, because economics is a priority, but I'm not sure. What I've seen, I'm not always sure that this is the best money that the province has spent, and the previous government supported Rita's quite well, actually. So, but they've ebbed and flow. I mean, it used to be the eastern corridor was together, and then one dropped out, and I'm not sure the status of that today, but there was more power in determining that. One of the other things they worked on is trying to have that eastern corridor transportation. And I felt that was, although it sounds good in principle, very frustrating, because ultimately, as a previous councillor always said, the truckers and the people that are hauling the goods will determine which direction they're taking, not economic development. And he was right. And so as much as you want to promote something, ultimately where the resources go to facilitate some of these things, sometimes you're chasing things that you're really not going to. And I think PEP's done a good job at chasing stuff that maybe they shouldn't have. But that's just a personal opinion. I think if you bring the other players into the room, they probably would differ from my analysis.
Yeah, I think PEP is going to have to improve its image quite a lot, because a number of the studies they did were redundant. They were duplication, like say, well, I already did that energy to waste. And then PEP showed up with their version of it, spent $100,000 on something that had already been done. Served no purpose. And so I lost some respect for PEP in that case, and also the Eastern Corridor. I mean, they were trying to move all the truckers up over the Cypress Hills. It just did not make any sense at all, when we already have a 4-lane highway here, just north of or south of the 36th. I think they're going to have a hard time convincing maybe some other municipalities that they need their support, and especially with the increased costs now again. I have a little bit of trouble with PEP, to be honest with you now. And I was on that board at one time. Unfortunately, it was when I was first on council, and so it was maybe over my head a little bit. But yeah, I think they're going to have to improve their image somewhat. And maybe their reporting also, like Clarence is looking for. That information is very important.
Good points, and I'll work on that reporting, either both from my side and from PEP. Like they might have to come twice a year and do a presentation so we can ask questions. But the one, like maybe on the positive side, if you take these tiny houses as an example, and Sandra wrote an article about that. There is one member from Bazzano who goes to a conference, a Newell Foundation conference, learns about tiny homes, gets in touch with PEP, who does a bit of research, makes some money available. And when you're networking with all the municipalities in the south, there might be Bow Island, there might be a Medicine Hat that thinks, gee, we're going to keep an eye on how that develops in Bazzano, and it might be something they could use. So that's the value of working together and talking. But it is, yeah, a frustrating process, and I agree.
There is lots of networking that I think is done, and we have to remember that all of those other members are trying to get something out of it as well. Like I think there's been the whole aerospace stuff at Bow Island has, I think, or foremost, I should say, yeah. There have been successes, maybe not always in our region, but I still think that there's some benefit. Tracy, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I kind of go back to if we could get some more information on budgets and projected budgets. Again, just going back to Brian's conversation about administration and that whole end of it, because sometimes that overpowers what's actually being done. And I just would like to see, I don't know if they have a projected budget, but I would just kind of like, just some more information.
I just forwarded to you, to everyone. So do you guys want to look at the information that Anne-Marie's forwarded and bring this back for our next meeting? And any other information that you can, that might be helpful, Anne-Marie? So we'll just sort of put this item, bring it back for our June 6th meeting. All right. Thank you. The Rolling Hills Cemetery Company, 11-4.
So this one, I guess I'm not sure how we go about approaching this one. We've had a request that has come in from the Rolling Hills Cemetery Company to assist with ground maintenance in the cemetery. Really, there's a couple of different things that are going on. One has to do with the limited involvement that the county has had in cemetery operations throughout the county. And one of the tables that's in the report that was provided summarizes those cemeteries and the extent of the county's involvement in the operation of those cemeteries. If you look at the bigger picture, those cemeteries are really just another facility that are operated by community groups and volunteers. And we have several other community group facilities that the county does assist with operating when it comes to grounds maintenance. And so the bigger question, I think, is whether or not council is wanting to look at extending the scope of service that the county is providing to these volunteer organizations, of which cemeteries are one category of volunteer organization. What we're suggesting is that it certainly would be appropriate for the county to look at fulfilling the request that has been submitted, but knowing full well that if this step is taken, chances are there's going to be additional requests coming in the future. Really, the precedent had been set on this one probably, I'm thinking 4 years ago or so, when one of the organizations in Rolling Hills had asked for service from the county to look after grounds maintenance for a facility that they had been looking after full operation and had full responsibility for a number of years prior to that. So it's fully expected that over time we will probably have additional requests for service of this nature trickle in, and I think that it would be appropriate for council to consider assisting these volunteer groups and organizations as these requests come in the future. For this particular one, the recommendation is that we agree to provide the support that has been requested.
And I think when we first got into this, we realized the precedent was being set, and in my mind, we were ready to accept that fact. Clarence.
So this is just for mowing, right? We wouldn't, and
that's right.
And that's, that's the only request that's been made. So, and we've taken that on in different areas. And it's one thing, it makes a lot of sense because not every one of these groups has a mower. The way we do it now, they have a cemetery cleanup. A couple of us bring mowers in and we mow the thing. But if everybody has to do that, it just becomes pretty. It's tough. It's tough to organize. It's tough to get everybody to do it. And then now you have a piece of equipment that's being used more broadly. I don't think we'd ever, there's a fence around it. I think that would be something that people would continue to be maintaining. It needs painting once in a while. Get a work group that does that. But that mowing does help if people do that. It is dry. It's not an area where stuff grows a lot. So certainly has been a real benefit. Where I think the one you were referring to is the Rolling Hills Park and Campground, where we do the mowing. We also do the mowing on they call the Ab Brown Memorial, which is a baseball diamond. So I mean, it is just a natural extension, I guess, of. I think we have to be careful, though, that Ken Todd's group still handle all this without having to increase workforce. That'd be one of my questions.
Wayne?
Excuse me, my machine is closed. Anyways, my point that I want to make here is that most volunteer groups are running out of people to do their work. Every group is getting, their membership is going down, so we should think for the future that the county will be asked to do just about all of it. And we're going to have to look at a budget for Todd's Ag Services to handle all of this, and it's just going to grow in the future because first of all, most of the volunteers are older people and they're getting older, they can't handle it, and young people aren't coming in, stepping up to take these jobs over. And every community has some facilities that need some kind of work done, and we're going to be the ones that they're coming to. So I think we should maybe seriously think, even in this budget, maybe putting a little bit more in Ag Services to handle this stuff.
And I think that we could certainly talk to Todd. He'll be in later, but he's never seemed to, I think he said he would let us know when it became overwhelming. And that's, they're often in the area already mowing, so it just makes sense to zip and do a bit more. So, all right, there's a motion that is required on this. Brian, sorry.
So I'm going to be the throw cold water on this. And what would be the ramifications if all the things on your list we would have to be responsible for? Like, you have a list there of the different community things within our jurisdiction, and if we would be responsible for if they would each come to us for the same request, what would that, first of all, add to our budget, and what would it add to the responsibilities? The reason I say that is because, after having just come, last summer, gone to Europe and seen some of the beautiful cemeteries there, they're all the responsibility of the families. And I'm not suggesting we shouldn't do it. I think we need to think about that and where the responsibility of the families are. And the families in Europe, they take a great deal of pride. They are beautiful. And they take a great deal of pride in their loved ones and what they've left behind as legacies. And it is quite evident. And anyways.
That was a question. You want to know what this whole thing would cost?
Yeah, the time-wise, and I know you can't pull that number out of a hat. I'm not expecting you to do that today, but if I look at the list, I think it would be quite substantial because, this is something that if we move forward with it, we can fully expect that every one of these other groups, if they're not already being part of it, they would be asking for it. And with all respect to Councillor Amelong, today it's the mowing, but what's to stop from requesting for a fence to be painted or replaced? Or I think the community has to take some responsibility. If they think this is an important part of their community, where is that?
Tracy.
Yeah, I guess I question too, you get into some of the community halls and the mowing that's required, like at castles, like they have a lot of grass. And they have a situation, again, it goes back to volunteers, kind of the chair of the community board, the hall board, he mows, and it's weekly. And it's not just a, 10-minute quick mow, it's, a good hour, 2 hours of mowing. So how far do we go with this? And, do we separate cemeteries from those other venues? I don't know. Like, do we look at it differently? But just something to keep in mind. Like, right now in Castles, we have great volunteer support, but, down the road, I don't know, right?
Kelly, Lionel.
The other thing too, from experience, is we have to, if we do decide to get into this, we're going to have to be, have it in writing or have an agreement of sorts, because families take great pride in their headstones and spend a lot of money, and so from experience, there's a lot of dealings with people who claim that the headstone was damaged by the mower or by the caregiver. So that we need to make sure that that's in the agreement.
Lionel.
I also think there's something to be said for the community involvement and what it does for the community to have some projects to do. I mean, it is part of their social network, really, and I think that's a valuable tool for them to keep those communities alive.
Anne-Marie.
A question for Clarence. Who does the actual digging of the graves at the cemetery in Rolling Hills?
That's left up to the individual who needs it. So if your kin is passed away, somebody just phones up, and the local backhoe fellow usually digs it. And the people that they pay that.
Any other comments? Do you want to, we're into deferring today, do you want to wait and ask Todd about more questions about this, or do you want to get this one looked after now? Huey.
In Vauxhall, there's a society that takes care of the cemetery. And in the last 3 years, they revamped the whole cemetery. It costs the families to upgrade it, and so they just sent a bill to the families, but they first asked if they wanted to do it. They said yes. And what they did was they poured cement all along the headstones so that the headstones sat on top of the cement so the mowers wouldn't damage the headstones. Everybody agreed, and it's really looking good, but there's a society that does it. Yeah.
And I'm sure if we look through this list of, there's different ways every community looks after things. And I totally agree that, as Lionel said, it is important to have that within a community. And it's always been there, but some communities are changing. They're more transient, and communities never used to change. So it is a bigger question than it used to be, I think. Wayne.
Why don't we just wait till Todd comes in and question him, see what he thinks on this, and then make the motion, whatever motion we decide to make at that time?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Certainly we can, that the mowing is just one form of maintenance, which is is part of what we do already. It's not like we're getting into the construction business and are going to start building structures or fences for people at this point in time. So Todd can let us know about the mowing for sure. Kelly.
Then something to think about too is we could accept this with a cost attached. Just throwing it out there, that there could be some cost recovery here, considering it is, in this case, a private company. It would be different if it was a county-owned facility, maybe, but,
It's not really a private company, it's
It's
a community organization.
oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
they got lumped into something that they should never have been called, right? Sort of humorous. Anyhow, we'll wait and ask Todd when it comes to mowing anyhow. Let's go on 11.5, Grassland School Division joint meeting, and that was about getting a date, I believe, and what was that date? The 20th, is it? No. 20th of June? So that's after our council meeting, hopefully. All right, so we will go with that. All good? As good as it gets? Oh, agenda items, yeah, right. That makes sense, Kevin. What's for supper? Is that meeting here? Yeah, it's our turn to host. Agenda items? I'd be curious to ask them some, their board questions about their amalgamation. I'd like to hear what they think years later. I mean, some of those people that were on the board were in school when that happened. Others have been on the board for a while. I don't know if any of the members there were, I think they're all too new to have been there at the time, but I'd be just curious to see what they think. If the two systems would be better to go back to today. So what else? They usually give us their projections for their schools as far as what's new. Tilly's getting a build eventually, I think. Any other items, Kelly?
Just thought it'd be a good point to update you about the library there in the new build. The space initially planned is a very small space called the library, but in fact there's a social area called there's a special word for it, but it's all attached. It's like the kitchen and the living room running together. So it's all an open space, and
like a big common area.
Common? I think there's another word too. But anyway, so the library, Newell Library is supportive and has looked into it and are happy with what they have planned.
Nice.
For the public part of the library.
Good. Clarence?
Yes, in fact, they made a very concerted effort to make sure that we knew that the public libraries were very welcome in the school. And I know Janine sat down with them for an afternoon, got the whole layout, and
nice.
She thought it was pretty good.
That's good. Good working together. Anything else? If not, we can add to the agenda that night or continue to add to it. Again, we have 2 more meetings before that meeting, so. All right, Councillor payment sheets for April. Any questions? Otherwise, a motion. Tracy moves approval with the changes. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Checks for payment. Payment register, I guess. Any questions about payments that have occurred? Brian?
I'll just make a motion to accept the payment register.
Okay. Okay. Brian moves acceptance. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Committee reports. Oh, functions of council. I skipped right over that. Functions of council, anything coming up? Okay, keep going. Community Planning Association, there was information. That was at Anne-Marie. Any questions?
Well, I want to thank Anne-Marie for a very good report. I found it interesting that at one time the government paid us to drain sloughs and so forth so we could cultivate them and make them worthwhile to somebody, and now it's just the opposite, of course. No, I thought that was rather hilarious.
Good conference, Anne-Marie. Go ahead.
And the one on Newell Foundation, it says Newell Foundation's business plan, but UB and I just decided that we wanted to give you an update on the history of Newell Foundation and what they're doing right now, just as a refresher. So the business part of it, the plan for 2020 to 2022 will follow later.
Good. Hubie?
I don't know if anybody's aware of the addition to the Newbrook Lodge. They're planning to build a solarium dining room to accommodate 72 people. And that's going to be built to the west side of the existing Newell Foundation building there, or Newbrook Lodge building. And it'll extend out into the parking lot about 50 feet. So that's ongoing right now, and they'll start building soon.
Other committee reports? Ellen?
Just a question for Hubie. Does that affect the parking, 50 feet out? Because all the residents...
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to take some parking away.
They're pretty locked in there. It's not a big area to expand. Tracy?
Just a couple comments about our last Parks and Recreation meeting. They're looking at installing a pickleball court. It's going to be a multi-sport kind of surface or whatever, but they're going to have pickleball, and that's over at Griffin Park. And also they, under Parks and Rec, they have $150,000 a year in their budget for walking paths. So, at our next meeting, we're actually going to be looking at the plan of where the walking paths throughout the city and stuff will be, where they're going to join up some different locations and whatnot. So that was kind of exciting. Not that that gets you very far, but at least it's something we're going to be looking at down the road. So that's kind of cool.
So Trace, that's something ongoing that they'll put $150,000 aside each year from now on?
Yeah, that's the way he expressed it, that it was something they have had in the past, and that's something that's in their budget. So we'll see.
Good. And Wayne?
How much is this pickleball court going to cost?
I don't think it was a whole bunch. They never really give us budget items, but I think it's kind of just more painting lines and just kind of taking a surface that's already there and making it more workable. But yeah, it didn't sound like... Hey, Lionel, is that...
There was very little cost, and it was mostly just more rearranging. The facility was already there.
If you're really curious, Wayne, the GEM community built a sport court that is multi-use, fancy schmancy. It's got fences and lights, and it's quite incredible. And that was over 100,000 a couple of years ago. They fundraised They got a government grant. They used some of provincial government grant, and they used money from the GEM Community Association bank account, which is mainly county money. And yeah, 3 sources, I'd say. And it always costs a bit more than you think, but yeah, they have lights, cameras, action, whatever. Hope it gets used lots. I try to point it out to anybody that's ever out in GEM to have a look at it, because it's behind the community hall. Yeah, it's been open for at least 2 summers maybe now. Other committee reports, that's what we're into. We didn't circulate the sheet today, but we can, anything else from that end of the table, or Hubie?
Wayne and I will be attending FCM next week. Wayne's going to tour Ottawa first, and then I'm going to show up a little later. So we'll have a little bit of fun over there.
No fun allowed at FCM. It's just work, work, work. So is it in, where is it in? Oh, Quebec City. I forgot where it was, yeah. No, not at all. And I'm driving through rural Quebec on the way. Well, that's good. I hope we see you again. Don't be too obnoxious, eh? They, Français, habitants. Of course, they're people, they're Canadians. Brian.
Well, I just wanted to ask if there's any feedback yet from either economic development or tourism on the tournament that just finished. What kind of, do we have any first thoughts while it's still fresh in your mind about successes, lessons learned, or, you know, I've heard a few things, but just curious.
Ellen?
Well, it was on the local news. It was fantastic. I don't know if you've seen it. It was on CTV, and amazing reporting, I thought, as to how successful it was. And tonight, I'm hopefully getting some update. It is the annual general meeting for the NRTA tonight. So I've only heard good things so far.
I was more interested in what your impression of that, not about what somebody else's report was.
Wayne?
I was watching the final game on TSN, and what the rest of Canada has seen was very impressive. For the Brooks area, Martin stood right out with his whiskers and everything, and but it was impressive what Brooks did, how they did it. They got some very good comments. I think it was very good for the whole community what they did, and the rest of the country is taking notice.
Marie?
Well organized, well planned. The last night when the barbecue was just awesome to see so many people lining the streets for the parade, and then coming in to see the final speeches and see the bandits. Hot dogs. It was just a really good community event, and I haven't heard anything negative. It was all good. People were just happy to be part of it.
I hope the business community, I've talked to a few people in restaurants who, Boston Pizza for one, felt really like they'd had a good week. Steaming Cup. Yeah. So that's what we were hoping for. Lionel, Brian?
Yeah, I agree with all your comments that it was a tremendous success, and I think the organization committee deserves a huge congratulations for what they did. And, you know, everybody involved, the volunteers and everyone else. I'm having a little problem with withdrawal. 2 games a day for 10 days was quite a bit.
What are you going to do now?
Exactly. But no, it was a tremendous success, and I think there was a few lessons that maybe could be learned too. The business community was a little bit unprepared, as it turns out. The Brooks Hotel ran out of some beer, which should never have happened, but there was a couple of things like that, but not serious. But so I think there's a lesson there to be noted. But it was a tremendous success. Great deal.
Brian?
Well, and the only reason that I was asking tourism whether they had any comments was because, again, not firsthand, but I'd heard that some people had to go to Lethbridge and Medicine Hat for hotels, and I was just curious whether everything was full in Bassano, Dutchess, and Brooks before that was sent. And again, I didn't hear directly from somebody that said, "Oh, I had to go to get," because everything was full in Brooks. I went to Medicine Hat. I was just curious whether there was any that happened, or whether it was just a rumor that was false. So, but you know, speaking for somebody that was at the final game, as Molly and Lionel was there. I'm not sure anybody else, but. What you've seen on television did not do justice to what was actually the atmosphere in that rink. It was unbelievable, the noise and the response. It was, yeah. So like Lionel said, you're sort of still on a high, but it was a pretty incredible event, and the community really was together. They ended up having 170 volunteers, and they turned, I think they said 70 away that wanted to participate, but actually weren't needed. So, and that was quite neat to be part of. I mean, I'm the kind of guy that I always like to be busy when I'm volunteering, and that wasn't always the case. But you know, over the course of the week, I went twice to Calgary to pick up players and referees, and it was pretty cool. So getting to talk to some of the people from other parts of the country. The two refs that I brought, I ran into them a couple times during the week. One was from Ottawa, one was from Montreal, and they were both saying, you know, they was their first time to Western Canada, either one of them, and they both said how much fun they had here, and they really couldn't say enough about how well they were treated and how welcoming the community was in everything that they did. So, anyways, that's...
Ellen?
Again, I'd like to reiterate that they've been so busy. We haven't gotten a report yet. And tonight, hopefully, I will find out if those hotels were too full. The representatives from the hotels hopefully will be there. And next time, perhaps I can bring a report out when I get the final facts.
Yeah, I'm assuming there will be some. Certainly the economic development group were involved with trying to teach the business community or educate them ahead of time, and had some, workshops. And so I'm sure there will be reports from them as well, Brian, information. Tracy?
My comment just personally was, when you drove around town, you didn't really know that something was going on, like that I didn't see a lot of extra signage. Like I know the ATB had jerseys and stuff painted on their windows, but really other than a few little signs kind of more downtown. So I think that kind of maybe just was, I don't know, just my opinion, maybe a little bit of a gap when we had kind of talked to the businesses about, because when you go into, like we've been in Edmonton when the rodeo's on the CFR, and they've got lots of stuff going on, and you just kind of get into that groove. And I kind of just noticed that was just, for me, I just thought that was lacking a little bit. And for us, it was a great celebration to have it here, and just, it would have been nice to see some more excitement,
Interesting. Anne-Marie?
And for me, it was so different, maybe because I'm not in town every day, but when I did come into town and I saw all these little signs, NJAC to all the way to the arena, and bandit shirts in stores, and I just thought it was all over.
Our team, our town, yeah.
Like when you drove in off the overpass, it took you all the way to City Hall before you seen a sign.
Oh, there were some flag things.
Maybe I just missed them. I mean, I very well could have missed them. I just, everybody has their opinion, but yeah. Yep.
All right, good comments. Kelly?
I was a bit confused about a month ago when we stopped, or when you guys started calling it the NJAC tournament. And for me, it was the RBC Cup. So there was some confusion there for me. I didn't know what NJAC was for a while. So just some clarification there would have been, or consistency. Maybe it was just because we called it the RBC Cup a year ago when we agreed to co-sponsor or co-support.
Before RBC backed out of the cup, obviously.
Is that what happened? They backed out?
ended.
It ended. Okay, I wondered about that. Okay. Anyway, it was just letting you into my little thoughts about a month ago when you guys started calling it. Yeah.
All right, we'll move on. Other committee reports. No other committee reports. I'll just tell you what's important from my pretty easy month. Anything different from minutes that haven't circulated, which you get the IMDP Joint Services ones. Did the Ronald McDonald, what's it called? McHappy Day thing. Kevin and I went to an irrigation and municipality meeting in Lethbridge again. That's the second meeting of an initiative that was the county of Lethbridge's to try and work with the irrigation districts better on items that cost money. And it has facilitated sessions that we've been going to, and as you all know, people who pay facilitators to do things, the facilitators just want to drag things out. So really the day that the second morning that we spent there was not a lot new under the sun. The next meeting is June 19th, the biggest thing has been the province was going to call the election, so ahead of the election, all of the departments shut down. They're there, but they wouldn't talk. They would just listen. It was the silliest thing I've ever seen. So then our second meeting, the election had occurred, but the departments weren't back up and running really because of the election that had occurred. So, our strong message to the facilitators was like, let's not get together again until the province can actually do something, because I think the biggest and most important thing that we need to have happen with the province is for Alberta Environment to hear us and to realize they have a huge part in some of these things that are difficult for municipalities and for irrigation districts. Certainly in our case, we have some very live action examples of Alberta Environment's inability to make a decision on things that interfere with our municipality, with the town of Bassano, with the EID and ratepayers. So stuff like that. Hopefully at our next meeting, there'll be, they can actually listen and tell us some stuff. Kevin, I don't know if you have anything else to say, but yeah. Anne-Marie.
Was this initiated by the county and the city of Lethbridge because they have issues, or is this meant for all the municipalities?
Yes, and they involved all the south, basically, all the irrigation districts and their munis as well.
So it was not initiated because of the conflict with the irrigation district and county of Lethbridge?
Oh, it might have been, but they did involve everybody else, yes. Yeah, the county of Lethbridge, how we always give them a hard time about everything, and it's just more of the same as far as I'm concerned. But they did involve everybody in it, so it's a bigger discussion, and it's a good discussion. It truly is. Kevin?
Yeah, I think it was initiated originally with the Foothills Little Bowl group through agreements or arrangements that aren't working that well between municipalities and their irrigation district. The one thing that I hope that we can get out of this is some clear responsibilities of who's responsible for what, who pays for what, because right now they just want the municipality and the irrigation district to work it out, and that to me isn't fair, where things cross roads, and whether they're part of a water supply or they're part of a drainage, there needs to be something written into how that process goes. And I'm not confident that these facilitators are going to get there. I think they're more of trying to mediate and get everybody to have their own particular agreements. And we don't have any issues in our area because the idea is very good with the drainage program, and we have annual meetings and the communication is good. So if anything comes out of it, I hope either regulations or legislation clears up who's responsible for what. You know, at least the recommendations for it.
I made it to Rolling Hills on Wednesday last Wednesday for the helicopter landing, which was, the wind was just howling as it was. And when the helicopter landed, it was funny. It was just quite dirty. And I had to go to something else later. Oh, a funeral, that's what it was in Pisano. And I just sort of sat there thinking, geez, I look like I've been out on an open no cab tractor on the Summerfall or something. Yeah, it was a very nice occasion, and even more humorous was one of the craziest little students I ever taught was on the helicopter, got off the helicopter as the lead sort of paramedic guy, which was very worrisome in a way. But and it's only fitting that I would say that about Logan Schaefer, Kelly, who, the stories I could tell. I'll just tell one. In grade 6, he had a teacher he didn't get along with, and he was always being asked to get out of the classroom, and so he'd come marching into my office and say, "I need to see my lawyer." I'd say, "How about we go for a walk, Logan?" He'd say, "Well, I guess that'll work too." But anyhow, there he was. So that was really fun, and it was a good day, I think, for Halo. Today, I have to go to the RPAP High Schools Day, where the schools in our area are having an introduction to the medical world at the college. And so there's a few things happening over noon hour that the county and city are going to be there. The town of Pisano was there earlier this morning because of where our hospitals are, and so I'll be sneaking away. So I will just be quiet and mention tomorrow's an emergency management course. Who's Tracy and Hubie and I are going to be at that. Also, open house at the food bank. Did you guys get information about that? Okay, I need to forward it then too. I have that written down. Anything else? Otherwise, Kevin and Todd, pull up a chair.
Yeah, I'll just comment quickly on the Bow River Working Group that I got appointed to. Thanks, Brian. So we had a meeting in Calgary, and Ivan and I rode together, so that was well worth the trip. It was good 2 hours spent both ways driving with Ivan, talking about things. In terms of the meeting, it's quite interesting to be in there with 60 or 70 bureaucrats and engineers and geologists, and yeah, it's the high focus on this is Calgary, of course, and so they're looking at 3 different projects for the Morley Reservoir, which is the furthest west, and then the Ghost Reservoir and the Glenbow, or all 3 of them. They're looking at a number of options, making a recommendation for enhancements for each of those areas. So they're looking at the costs of the reservoirs, how much volume they can add to new storage, and it's going to be for both flood mitigation and drought. So that's the exercise that that their group is going through. So we'll have a meeting every 3 months. They're going through the exercise right now, so I'll have more information at the next meeting, but nothing's anticipated to be wrapped up until to year end. So from our end down here, I think Ivan is most interested in drought storage. So that's kind of where our focus was.
Brian?
So Kevin, what do you think that the proposal for the dry dam, this Springbank dry dam, do you think that's going to be put on the shelf, just your gut feeling, or do you think that I mean, that's really what this is looking at, other options, if I'm correct, and knowing the dynamics of what is coming out of this when it comes to, like you said, flood and drought. Does that, will it impact, do you think that should be reconsidered, I guess, in your opinion?
Yeah, so they're looking at the impacts. So the furthest east, of course, has the most property impacts, but I think it's probably the most attractive right now, because part of it is through First Nation lands, and some in their rating formulas they have a higher ranking if it doesn't impact First Nation lands and things of that nature. So they have to do the costing exercise to determine what the costs of those impacts are. The volumes of water is going to be key, because I mean that is the goal that they're looking at. So the furthest west, the Morley Reservoir, can add another 150,000 cubic meters. It's the largest by far. And what the engineers had said there is that there's drainage sources that enter all along that line, and they have to do those calculations. That's why they don't think one on either end is going to be the best solution. They're looking at recommending 3 individual projects out of that. So I don't think one is going to weigh heavier on the others, other than through their ranking formulas.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, we'll move to item 10.1, Ag Fieldman's report. Welcome, Todd.
Perfect, thank you. So probably most of this we've talked about in the past, but this is a little more formal and actually has some solid numbers. So good year selling strychnine, I think. We're probably getting pretty close to the end of it. I think most of the guys have their seed in the ground now, so they've been seeing everything that they needed to control. So we only sold 791 bottles of strychnine, which is about, I'd say it's a little bit below average. We're usually closer to 1,000, so we'll maybe see a little bit more into the middle of June. Our drills have had a decent spring, and they still got kind of 1,000 acres ahead of them, probably between the 3. So not horrible, but not great either. And then the other equipment, other rentals, we've had some 4 scale rentals, a couple calf tables, some loading chutes. I think a few more guys have bought loading chutes in recent years, so we're not seeing that go out as much. And then, of course, our barbecue has been out a bunch of times. We are going to do our club route survey again according to policy. Grasshoppers, as always. Bacterial ring rot, we expect 4 or 5 fields. And then I think we're going to partner a little bit on virulent blackleg, which is it's a pest under the Ag Pest Act, but we haven't done a bunch of work on it in quite some time. It hasn't been super prevalent, but it's starting to peek its head back out a bit. And then, of course, we do the weather reporting through the federal government. We did get some Downey Brome inspecting, and we've started some control. We were really kind of pushed back on the control season just because we didn't have any rain. So Downey Brome kind of acts as a winter annual, but it also acts as an annual seed. So some of it germinates in the fall and comes in the spring, and some of it just germinates in the spring. So we wanted a little bit of moisture before we did some control so we can get them annuals, but we kind of just had to bite the bullet and get going. So we might have some double passes to do, but we'll make that work. We are going to start some roadside spraying right away. The road top spraying with municipal services will start next week. And then just about when we're done that, we start the road shoulder spraying. So about the middle of June, after the rainy rodeo week, hopefully. I think Emerson had a great May long weekend. Not record numbers for money, but the sites were almost all full. I believe we had maybe 1 or 2 that weren't quite full for the whole weekend. So that's pretty good. And it's still, there's still 5 or 6 people down there and a couple big tenting groups, so exciting that way. We're also out maintaining all of our hamlets and subdivisions. They mowed the yard the first time for you guys today because they knew you were coming, wanted it to look as good as possible. And we also did our inspections, our our playground equipment inspections last month, and I mentioned that last time we talked as well. But mostly, what came back, there was a couple nuts that had screwed themselves back. Kids, whatever, things shift. And then the pea gravel is just in different places than where it was put. And the pea gravel has to be a certain distance from the bottom of a slide, from the bottom of a swings, those kinds of things. So it's pretty basic to just kind of level it back out, refresh everything a little bit. That was our main problem. So I think we have that all controlled. That's a pretty easy fix and cheap too. I think our municipal partnerships are going well. We started spraying in the city this week. We're going to do our grassland spraying this weekend. Bazzano has been sprayed, I believe, all the Roundup sites or the glyphosate sites, just for total vegetation control, and then we'll do the rest of it as time permits. We got approval yesterday from CPR to do their maintenance for them this year, so no contractors, no monkeying around, just us going out and doing it. So we'll be doing the storage line in Bazzano. Again, we're hoping for a little bit of rain to get some more kosher coming, but we'll spray it when we have to. And then the rest of it probably second or third week of June. We did end up with 4 new faces this season. We had one of our long-term seasonals that's kind of left us a bit to get a little more healthy. So we hired 2 new seasonal equipment operators. We'll have 2 new roadside mowers, and Patricia is our long-term seasonal that's still here. So she'll be training them up here right away, because we start that about the 3rd week of June when the grass is kind of headed out. And then we had 2 on our vegetation spraying program. So they pretty steep learning curve here for the first few weeks. There's lots of different pieces of equipment, lots of different processes. Of course, there's lots of paperwork, but I think we'll get them through it like we always do. And again, my shameless plug for the weed school on June the 5th in Rainier. Anybody that wants to learn more about municipal weed inspecting and legislation, that's your day. So just let Jolene know if you're coming. We'll make sure there's a delicious steak available. And that's about all I had, unless there is questions, Molly.
All right. Ellen.
Now, we recently, with a few of us, went to the Southern Alberta Club Road Workshop. And I'm wondering if, and it was a bit of a very urgent issue. And I know our policy states that we are visually inspecting. Has the department thought about looking at high-risk fields and doing some, what was the word they were using, scouting instead?
Yeah, so our visual inspections is kind of a form of scouting. We just do it from the roadside more than going through the whole field. We don't necessarily have the resources at the right time to go and scout 371 canola fields. So that's why we kind of do the visual inspection, and then if there is anything noted, we go back. So the high-risk areas, the areas where we know a landowner has had clubroot in the past, or we've kind of heard some things, whatever, we definitely look there a little bit more than other places. So.
Other questions for Todd? Todd, we had a discussion about mowing grass. The Rolling Hills Cemetery Company has has requested that as a maintenance thing, and we just sort of had a more general questions about how much of this we are going to end up having to do, and just curious to your opinion on how much it bogs you down or requires more people to be hired, or where you're at with thinking about that. And grass. We'll start with mowing anyhow.
Sure.
In our little communities.
No, it's a great question, and we've kind of batted this around, and we've actually talked about cemetery maintenance many times in the past, but it wasn't really something that we had wanted to get into until the volunteers needed us, right? As far as doing the work, I don't think it's a problem, realistically. Some of maybe the level of service that we would be expected to supply might not be what we're used to. You know, we don't, if we're on a schedule and then there's a funeral, we don't know if that means we have to go and do a bunch of maintenance before people come, or that kind of thing. It's that level of service that we're not we're not knowledgeable on. As far as doing the maintenance on our schedule, it's very basic. It's just running a mower for another hour. In most of our hamlets, we have those hours to invest. I don't think we'd have to hire anybody else because realistically, we're in those communities already. So it might mean some overtime for the crew, but these are all seasonal employees that are interested in that kind of money to go back to school. So a couple of hours of overtime is not something that we couldn't get them to do.
Does that answer your questions, people, or more depth? Brian?
Well, I guess mine wasn't necessarily one in particular, but we had a list there of possible, Tracy brought up Castles Hall, and I'm sure there's, the list is there, right? And I was just mostly questioning the capacity. Should we have a multiple of these that come and say, well, you're doing it for Rolling Hills Cemetery. We're within the county too. When are we gonna, because it's costing us time and money to do a similar type community facility. So I'm just curious about how far down we go before you hit the wall with your staff. I think that's where my question was, as far as, and maybe we should, I don't know, it's that, but I think we have to understand that before we go ahead on a Rolling Hills cemetery.
So we have gone through the exercises in the past for all the little subdivisions that kind of in the county, how much it would cost to maintain the roads like we do in the hamlets where it's kind of on a regular schedule. I don't know that I've gone through the community ones. If I have, it hasn't been in quite some time. So that might be an exercise to actually go through and determine how much, they're not ginormous sites, but some of them aren't in areas like, especially when you consider castles. We don't mow often in castles, so that would be an out of the way experience for our crew. So that might change that one a little bit. The places like Rolling Hills, we're sending an entire crew down there because there's lots to mow already. So that one's specifically not that hard, but I guess I haven't looked at the time commitment for all of them.
Wayne?
So how much would you be committed on what service level you would offer? Like, would you go in with a weed whipper and go around all the tombstones and stuff? Because that takes time, and so...
Yeah, and I think the difficult part about defining a service level is it's not the same in every community or every community group. So those are conversations that we would have to have with specific community groups. Because I know when I briefly talked to the Rolling Hills Cemetery, or Rolling Hills Community Company, whatever it is, Rolling Hills Cemetery Company, they mentioned that, it's the big mowing that they have a hard time keeping up with, and they said they would be able to keep up with the weed whipping, but we all know that those things shift over time, and then it becomes, well, maybe you could just weed whip this time, and then it's maybe you can weed whip every time, which is great. I mean, we love being part of the community, but that's what I mean. Everybody has their own ideas of, everything takes time, right? So.
And the level, like you said, from community to community, that's maybe perhaps where we need to get more involved if that becomes an issue.
And we've tried sitting down and honestly ironing out a level of service that needs to happen from our standpoint in places like Rolling Hills, like Gem, our hamlets where we're always at. We know that the grass doesn't grow as much in Gem as it does in Rolling Hills. We know that Lake Newell Resort irrigates, so they need better service because things grow faster. These are things we know, but to iron it out perfectly, it's difficult with maintenance activities. It's not impossible, it's just difficult. And we know when you have a $700,000 house, you're more apt to complain about taller grass than you are when you have
70
or whatever, right? We know that. That's fine. I don't blame anybody for that. So maybe what a guy should do is try to figure out what it would cost to do those things and a time commitment, and see if there is going to be if we were to just do them all, what that might look like in 5 years, 10 years when volunteers kind of slow down.
So Other thoughts, questions for Todd? I don't think this is something that you should start doing tonight, as far as figuring it out for the future. That's my feeling. But.
Well, and the other interesting part, I'm not sure, did you bring a map of the Rolling Hills Community Cemetery? So part of these, and great planning on Rolling Hills Community, they thought they were going to have a lot of dead people at one time, but their property is massive. It is absolutely massive. Their fenced-in area is big enough, but then they own twice as much on the other side. So those are very easy.
Maybe they could sell it all.
Hey, excess cemetery property, quiet neighborhood. You always got to look at the positives. But
Wayne.
Todd, have you checked into the price of sheep lately? You know?
Sheep are cheap. It's the herder that we have to pay really well.
I forgot about him.
Because I don't know many people that want to do.
You thought about being a shepherd in your next life? Wait. All right. Anything else for Todd? We're a little bit overdue for our public hearings. And Brian, I think I'll just let you start them off, and then in case for some reason they get prolonged, and you can carry on. I have to leave in 5 or so minutes, so we'll let. Thank you, Todd. Mark, you have some municipal service reports. You do? Okay, so that can be later then. Okay, let's make a motion to accept Todd's. No. We'll remember, yeah, let's make a motion to accept Todd's report today. Hubie moves, all in favor? Opposed?
And then just a motion to authorize us to move ahead with maintaining the cemetery.
You want to go to back, yeah, we should do that too. Back to that motion as well before it gets forgotten. The Rolling Hills Cemetery motion 11-4. Clarence.
Make that motion.
Further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. And we're good to go. So we will get Brian to carry on and move us into public hearings.
Okay, I need a motion to move into public hearing. Wayne makes that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we're in. Alice, I guess it's yours.
Thank you. This is a public hearing for 2 road closure bylaws. The first one is bylaw 1950-19. The purpose is to close the road allowances as shown on the attached maps. I just have the first map up there for part 1. The landowner is applying to close and lease these road allowances to allow for existing pivots to continue operating across the affected areas. The land is in Division 6. There's a feedlot site for Sundial livestock feeders, approximately 7 miles east of Bassano. Approval to proceed was provided at the April 11th council meeting. The public hearing for bylaw has been advertised. There were no responses from any adjacent landowners as of May 15th or as of today as well. All the responses from required referrals have been received and there are no objections. In discussion with municipal services, they have no issues with the road closure application. So the options are to provide first reading, after which time it will be sent to Alberta Transportation, or request more information or refuse the bylaw. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Any questions for administration or Alice on this? We have nobody from the public here representing or speaking for this or to question. So just continue on, Alice.
Thank you. The next road closure bylaw is 1951-19. The purpose of the application is to close the road allowances between Northwest 17-16-16 and Northeast 18-16-16. The landowner is requesting closure of this road allowance in order to facilitate a new pivot. The land is in Division 4, about 5 miles southwest of Rainier. Approval to proceed was provided at the April 11th council meeting. It was advertised for 2 weeks and circulated. It was also forwarded to Alberta Environment and Parks for comments regarding the Crown-owned lands that we outlined at the last meeting. There are no responses from adjacent landowners as of today. None of the required referrals had any objections to the application. Alberta Environment and Parks, we actually got a response from them, and they said they had no concerns with the closure and lease of this road allowance. So the options for council are to provide first reading, request additional information, or refuse the bylaw application. Thank you.
Again, as there's nobody here from the gallery to ask questions, do we have any questions from council for Alice or other staff? Not, then looking for a motion to move out of public hearing. Clarence moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we'll continue on to the bylaws for road closure 1950-19.
Brian will leave for this one.
Okay. Note that Councillor Phillips is asking to be excused. We need a motion for second reading. Kelly.
Motion to approve second reading.
It says second reading on, oh, it says first reading, sorry. For this one, I want to, yeah, sorry, Kelly. First reading? Questions? If not, motion, all in favor?
We have questions over there.
I'm confused which one we're talking about because...
I'm sorry, it's 1950-1 first reading. And it's...
But under bylaws, it's got, am I looking at it wrong? It's got second reading.
Yeah, right before that it says first reading. On the 8.1, it says first reading right at the end of all those land locations. Yeah, I was confused too, Tracy. So we're, any other questions? If not, then we're dealing with first reading moved by Kelly. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Motion for second reading. Wait, Hubie makes that motion. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alice.
This one doesn't get second reading until after it comes back from Alberta Transportation.
So we have on our agenda it says motion. Bylaw 1950-19 second reading. So I'm just following the agenda.
I think maybe I have a more recent agenda because mine doesn't have second reading.
Okay, that's fine.
So in this case, what happens with the road closures is we do public hearing and first reading, and then it gets sent to Alberta Transportation.
Okay. I understand. I'm just following the agenda. So anyways, so then we'll strike that and move on to 8.2, which is bylaw 1951-19. And we need a motion for first reading. Wayne makes that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And I assume this is the same. We can't have a second and third reading on this also. Okay. Okay, so what else do we have for you, Alice?
I have item 11.1, approval to proceed for another road closure.
Okay, 11.1. Go ahead.
This application is interesting. If you remember when we closed all the road allowances for Millicent a few years back and sold them, at the time we had contacted the other adjacent landowner. There was a third landowner who at that time did not want to close and consolidate. This application is actually coming from his daughter, who has now purchased two parcels, sorry, and has now come in and requested that the road allowance be closed and sold to her. So this is the application for that. And the request here is for approval to proceed for a closure and sale.
Thanks. It's for sale
Sorry,
or for
there's
lease?
a typo in the box there. It says road closure and lease. Everything else, I assume, says sale, and I just missed that one.
So it's for sale, not for lease? Okay. Questions? Anne Marie?
This is still part of Millicent, the way it used to be. So all the road allowances are closed and sold in that area. So is that not correct?
Millicent is the blue line up on the diagram. So this is actually outside of the hamlet of Millicent now, just barely.
Yeah. Give me a minute. I'll make the motion to approve with road closure and sale.
Questions? What was the history, Anne Marie? I know that there was some dispute over who wanted what. Has that all been resolved, or do you have that information or somebody?
That was a different landowner, and that was to the north. And that was from the real Millicent hamlet, where there were road allowances used for storage of machinery. There were road allowances used for septic field, and those two landowners sorted it all out and closed and bought road allowances so a pivot could be put up, and some of the properties were moved.
Questions? Clarence?
So is this the last one in this whole procedure?
There might be one more piece on the west side of Millicent, but it would involve closing roads within what we've designated as the hamlet. So my thought would be this should be the last one.
Other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, Alice. What's left? I don't have my checklist in front of me, so Kevin.
Mr. Chairman, we just have the minutes yet, I think. I've gone through and reworded that last paragraph, if we want to do that one.
Okay.
I can read them.
Yeah, maybe just read it so we're clear on what we're voting on.
Okay. So I've changed it. I know it was a consolidation of a lot of different discussion that we had, but here it goes. The Chief Administrative Officer suggested keeping the existing tax rates for 3 years, which will allow for a transition period with surplus money set aside for future municipal initiatives or projects. A user fee philosophy is suggested to pay for 100% for certain municipal services such as water, sewer, waste, etc., where services provided are only to a certain group of taxpayers. He suggested that future tax policy be set based on true costing model for the new municipality. For new tax rates, he suggested that mill rates be initially set at 3.25 for rural residential and hamlets under a population of 1,000, 3.25 for farmland, 6.5 for other residential and small commercial ratepayers based on a set employee count, subject to a satisfactory business licensing program being implemented. All other non-residential properties, he suggested that the mill rate be set at 8.125. He further indicated this would allow tax savings for all ratepayers as compared to what they currently pay now. For recreation, he suggested that 25% of facility operations be funded through general taxation with special taxation model specific to a servicing area be implemented for additional amounts that may be required. He suggested that programming funding be offered through budget application process similar to how the county handles recreation currently. For recreation capital funding, he suggested that 50% be funded through general taxation, borrowing, or reserves, with the balance from grants, donations, and other funding sources. So that would be the new paragraph. And I think it is still a consolidation of the discussion, but I think it accurately reflects what we discussed.
Thanks, Kevin. With that update, I guess we're looking for a motion to accept the minutes. Kelly makes the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Did we do the direct debit register? I don't recall doing that. So we did the councillor payment sheets. We did do that? Okay. Sorry. So then I'm unless I'm incorrect, I'm at post agenda. Is that correct? Tracy?
There's, what about 15.2, that Cairo's blanket exercise?
We can certainly do that first, but it's after post agenda. So, you know what? Why don't we do that, and then we'll be at lunch, and then we can come back for in camera post agenda. Okay? Does that work for everybody? Okay. So information item update on regionalization.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think there's any further updates from our last council meeting where we updated after the last meeting. The next meeting again is going to be about governance and taxation policy from the discussion that we had.
Okay, thanks, Kevin.
The meeting is moved, I think it's on the Tuesday in June because there was a conflict on the Wednesday, so the first Tuesday.
So June 4th? Yeah, okay. 15.2, we had some information that was circulated as far as, I'm not even sure how I pronounce this blanket exercise. Any comments from who put this on the agenda? If not, we'll just keep it as information. Corporate strategic priorities chart. Any questions? Event submission form. Financial information package. Anything on that? Oh, sorry, Tracy.
That's okay. Just going back to that blanket exercise, this was brought forward through joint services, and it was an initiative that was approved at that level. And I'm not even sure. There's a registration. Now I read through it all again. Now I can't remember all the details, but they're required to have 20 to 40 participants with 8 elected officials partaking in this exercise. And now I think we were to reply if we were interested in participating in this. So I don't know if that we needed at this point here to see if there's anybody from this group that wanted to participate in it. It has to do with basically establishing relationship with Indigenous processes and learning culturally and historically. And it goes, I think it's only 2 hours. It is on, I'm a worth of knowledge here. I'll have to look in my emails. It's coming up here.
June 19th, from 12 to 3 o'clock, and if you go, you have to bring socks.
Thanks, Tracy. So you're all able to submit your own registration, or if you're willing to participate, and determine that on your own time. Any questions for Tracy as far as this? I think we had all the information sent to us through an email. Wayne?
Who initiated this originally?
Well, it was brought forward from a City Brook staff, and if I remember correctly, it was something that maybe they had participated in staff-wise. They brought it forward as an exercise that it would be good to bring forward to our region. And then it was brought up at Joint Services, and Joint Services had agreed that this was a process we should participate in.
Any other questions? Comments? Anne-Marie?
Not on this, but I have a question about the financial statement for Q1 that we got. And it is on page 15 of 47, where we put in the budget 150,000 for oil and gas well drilling, and we actually got 363,000 already. So is that an indication that things are picking up?
Page are you at, Anne-Marie?
15 of 47. Revenues, sales of goods and services.
Yeah, we'll have to get Matt answer that. It certainly looks like it's moved up. I'm curious to see what it has been in the previous years, so we'll get Matt to address that if we can. I mean, in specifics to why it's up that high.
Questions for the first quarter financials? If not, any other questions in regards to the agenda to this point? If not, I think we'll probably adjourn for lunch and come back, and that way we can go in camera for our post-agenda items. What time's best? Half hour or 40 minutes? 40 minutes? Quarter to? Okay. We'll adjourn to 1:45.